kind of advice do you have to homeowners?
Practicing that preparedness, starting the conversation now is always going to be a benefit to any association out there.
Welcome to Recovery Report Live. I'm Odess, president of GlobalPro, where we manage risk to recovery, and we have managed more than $1 billion in that recovery. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about a claim story today. The reason why I want to talk about claim story is that, and what I mean by claim story, is a story where we were hired by a client to represent their interest in adjustment of a claim. And I call that claim story. The claim story is, and the reason why I want to tell the story, is to give you a real life example of why you should call GlobalPro, what we do, and how we can help your community association and business owner rebound from loss or damage. But the story doesn't stop there. It goes beyond that and talks about how this association is now going to contract with us to help them place insurance, because we're doing more of that every single day. But before I get there, I want to tell you a little bit about this claim story, because I get asked all the time about a rather complicated question, right? It sounds simple, but I actually think it's quite complicated because of the misinformation that all of you as policyholders have heard, have been groomed to believe to be factually true. For instance, that public adjusters are fraudsters, even though if you look at the fraud committed, most often in Florida or even throughout the country, it's most often done by insurance brokers, agents that represent allegedly the interest of the policyholder. Now, if you dig a little bit deeper, you realize very little of that has much to do with property insurance. Most of it has to do with health benefits or life and death and dying, things that a public adjuster don't even engage in and can't legally in many states like Florida. So the reality of it is that there is a lot of misinformation. And a question we get asked a lot is, when is the best time to hire GlobalPro? Now, there's a rather simple answer, which is today, before you experience a loss and damage. Let us know if you're interested. We have what's called a preferred client services agreement, which will allow us to year-round be your sounding board with regards to all things insurance for your community association or business owner. Now, most often though, our solicitation of services occurs after someone has suffered loss and damage. We are continuing to promote this idea of call us first. You see it right there in the top corner, right? Call us first. There's a lot of meaning behind it, and this claim story is a prime example of why that matters and why we tell you call us first. Why? Because for starters, you're not an insurance expert, right? You, as a board member, as a property manager, an engineer, contractor, you are not an insurance expert. Your broker is not an insurance adjuster. Most often, what they know is only what they've been told by your insurance companies to be true. And also, their skill sets are to sell you product. And many of them, colleagues of mine, are incredibly good at knowing what, or can anticipate what the market will need in order to place you with the best product at the best price. Now, there's been a shift away from obviously the best price, because right now a lot of associations particularly are making decisions simply by, well, that's all they can offer me, and there's only one option, allegedly. Now, and if you dig a little bit deeper through that, well, while there only may be one product being offered, it doesn't mean that the negotiations need to stop there. It doesn't mean you should just accept it for what it is and just buy that product, because you are buying a product. And again, your broker is a broker, right? When you think of a car broker or any other type of broker, a broker that does food, that does shipping or anything else, we accept that person as to a middle person, right? A middle person, a person that is trying to balance a relationship on both sides and make a deal. For whatever reason, when it comes to insurance, an insurance broker, a lot of people like to believe that they're there for them, the policyholder, right? But the reality is there's still a broker. There's still a balancing act. They still have a contract with the insurance company. And a lot of times their agencies that they work for share in the profits if you don't make claims. Share in the profits if you don't make claims. Now again, that doesn't mean that most of the retail brokers that you deal with or interface directly, that they'll receive any sort of direct compensation, but their agencies most often do. And you can ask about that. And some of the websites for these insurance companies, in fact, to disclose it. And I don't see any issue with it, right? If it's a very profitable year, you sell a lot of insurance, they collect a lot of premiums, and there's not a lot of losses, sure, it's great. They did a great job. They placed good insurance. You're a good client of the insurance company because you're making them very rich and they're making a lot of profits. I think they should absolutely pay their salespeople, the broker, more money. It makes sense. However, they're still not insurance adjusters. And most of them don't even have a copy of your insurance policy if you were to ask them today for it. So that brings me back to my original question, which is, when is the best time to hire GlobalPro? Today, right? Why? Because we want to make sure you have your insurance policy. We want to make sure that if you suffer loss and damages, that you can immediately give proper notice of your claim, prompt notice of your loss, and immediately start to mitigate your damages with the expectation that you will in fact get paid for covered losses and damages. So, and you're not going to know whether or not you are expecting a recovery unless you have a copy of the policy and an insurance coverage expert has told you whether or not your damages would be covered and to what extent they will be. Because even if you do suffer certain losses and damages, and under today's insurance policies, there may be certain limitations or increased deductibles. So you may be insuring part of your risk, if not most of it, or in some instances, all of it, right? So we've given some examples in prior broadcasts about sewer backups. Most often, those that occurred or in recent history, all those that occurred on-site would be covered. And those that occurred off-site that led to damage on your property would be excluded. Things have changed. However, some insurance companies have made it a practice to pervert that language to basically say anytime water came out of a drain, it's not covered. But that's not the intent of that coverage or limitation on your policy, right? And so without having an insurance coverage expert from GlobalPro on your side, representing your interest, today, you're at a disadvantage. You don't know. You don't know what to anticipate. You get in this you start delaying things in the mitigating efforts, and you become an issue in the process, right? You slow it down. It makes it more difficult to make decisions that are in the best interest of your unit owners, if you're a board member or if you're a manager. So you don't want to become the issue in the claims process. You don't want to slow things down if not necessary. However, you do want to take your time, right? Because you want to understand where coverage may be, to what extent you are going to have to go out of pocket for the expense or costs associated with doing these things. And you want to make sure that the insurance company has had the opportunity to inspect your damages and have completed their evaluation and inspection of those losses and damages, and that payment is forthcoming. Because the last thing you want to be doing is dipping into reserves, whether for your business or your community association, spending money that has been earmarked for something else or reserved for other things for losses and damage that are covered by your policy. But again, your insurance brokers most often are not going to have a copy of your actual full copy of your insurance policy. Most of them have probably sold you whatever it is that the market will give you or allegedly give you without any sort of negotiation or a proper evaluation and walkthrough of typical instances or examples of types of losses that you may experience simply based on your loss history, right? So you can look at your loss runs and say, hey, we've had X amount of different types of losses over the X amount of years. How will this policy respond to each one of those? Like, they haven't gone through those scenarios. And through situational analysis, identified where there might be shortfalls or issues for your association that may experience certain types of losses on a more regular basis than others, right? So you want to be able to walk through these things, right? And without an insurance coverage expert that's there with you, advocating on your behalf, then it makes it very difficult. Again, your broker's there to sell insurance, your contractors are there to do work. They're most interested in just getting paid and getting on to the next job. Your engineers and contractors, if you called them up and you said, hey, I think I have a bad roof, they're most often gonna find a bad roof. Why? Because they're in the business of making money, right? So if they told you your roof is fine, it most often is not going to lead to any sort of remuneration or payment, and it's going to hit their bottom line in any way. And then they've spent the time out there. Again, not to say that they're bad people or that they're incentivized to do these things, and you may have a relationship which may lend itself to more honesty, but again, their interests are not in your insurance recovery. They're not interested in, and they should not be legally, doing any sort of analysis of coverage and advising you on insurance, certainly not your contractors. I think the law is pretty clear on that in many different states throughout the country in which we operate. But this brings me to this story, this claim story, right? This claim story is about an association that suffered damages where a large piece of concrete fell from the parapet wall at the roof elevation and caused substantial damage to a glass porte-cochere. It was a life-threatening actual situation where, because this was the main entrance of the building, there was egress, ingress there needed life safety protected. There was a lot of police involved and barricading areas, and it was a demand for emergency services. And of course, this association at some point early on in the process, picked up the phone, called their broker and said, hey, this is the situation. And the immediate reaction within minutes was that it's not covered. In fact, there were several board members that led the charge on this idea that there's no coverage, and reassured the broker that they were in fact right. Now, the situation wasn't going to change just simply if there was coverage or not. They still needed to deal with this concrete issue, this concrete that had fallen and was falling from the building, creating this life-threatening situation. So the management company, very experienced management company, very large management company, tapped into the resources, started making some phone calls. First, it was believed by their engineer of record that they needed a crane in order to lift the concrete off the edge of the building in order to secure it so that it didn't cause any more damage or didn't threaten any more lives. So the management company, with all of its resources, could not actually find a crane company that could immediately respond. And I have worked closely with this management company on many, many different losses over the years, tens of millions of dollars in recovery representing associations. And their next phone call was to us here at GlobalPro. And of course, GlobalPro reaches into its contact database and finds 3 crane companies that are willing that same day to mobilize and to help secure it. And we put them in touch with the association directly. The association, of course, needs to make a determination on their own as to who they're going to hire and what they're going to do. We went obviously rated the pros and cons. Again, GlobalPro hasn't even been hired at this point, but when's the best time to go on GlobalPro? Clearly demonstrating today was that answer, right? Because had they called us before calling the broker, we would have not only helped them through the issue regarding securing the building and mitigation and making sure that they were making the right decisions, making sure they're documenting the damages and protect the evidence and everything else that's needed, because ultimately this comes down to money. How are we going to pay for this and who's going to pay us back, the insurance company being, for the damages, or a third party if they're responsible for it. Subsequently, obviously being on the front lines and a lot of disasters, we do have a network of experts, contractors that can serve your interests, right? So we can reach out and talk to them and help and get you in contact immediately with them. And that's exactly what we did here. So a great example of today, why that is the right answer, why call us first does matter. And ultimately, the crane operators did arrive on site within hours. And as they were mobilizing, GlobalPro met with the crane operators, started talking with them. One of the gentlemen that was there, I absolutely applaud his efforts, went up there, looked at the situation, gave immediate feedback on it. And he was actually a union steel worker, and of course heights were of no concern to him. Leaned out over the edge, he had his proper life safety gear on and everything else, and said, look, we don't need a crane. We can rig this thing, we can take this thing down at a far less cost than actually erecting a crane with the permit issues and the length of time it's going to take. We'd be doing this all night long. They were able to do this within hours, something that they thought may take more than a day. Rigged it, secured it, documented it, helped us document it. Ultimately, the association hired GlobalPro based on the recommendation of the management company and also their own witnessing our sense of urgency and our immediate reaction to this situation, right? We immediately were meeting with the engineer of record and also the contractor that was on site doing other work for the association. They just so happened to be doing some facade work unrelated to this instance, and provided us great amount of insight, and also they had immediate access to plans and drawings so we could evaluate kind of how this the situation may have occurred. And the interesting thing as we started our process of investigating a claim is we come to learn that part of the reason why the broker and the board members respectfully truly believed that this claim was not covered is that it was assumed that this was some sort of latent defect of some sort that would not be covered by the insurance policy. Well, first off, that was a grave misunderstanding of insurance. First of all, because even if there is a latent defect or an issue, doesn't mean specifically that all or some of the damage isn't covered by insurance. And we do a lot of construction-related damage losses, particularly on a defect side, on a first-party and third-party basis. So we, of course, as insurance coverage experts, know that there is still a possibility of coverage for some, if not all, of those damages. However, again, the assumption was that there's no coverage. But upon further investigation, and because of the experience of GlobalPro here, we started asking questions about this particular area of the building and its vulnerability to weather conditions such as lightning strikes. And one of the most obvious things was that there's a large mast that was up there, part of the lightning protection system, where the bolts of it were secured into this piece of part of the concrete that was separating and some of which fell and was falling from the building. Well, we got with the lightning protection company and started doing a deeper and further investigation, which took several weeks once we got it all done. It was pulling lightning strike reports, actually consulting with meteorologists, speaking with the lightning protection company, the engineer of record, the management company about their experience of the property because they had been there many of years. And there was actually evidence found that lightning actually struck the building and it had absolutely nothing to do with any sort of latent defect, which led to a very easy coverage determination for the insurance company once we were able to furnish all of this information and all of these reports. And ultimately, and here's the silver lining, right? Remember, we started this whole story with board members and a broker talking and meeting together and assuming there's no coverage, and assuming that you needed a crane, you were going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars just simply on mobilization of a crane, to a situation that there is 100% of coverage, and you didn't need a crane. And while it was going to take several days for a crane operator to arrive on site, GlobalPro was able to assist in locating a crane operator that could arrive same day. We were able to accelerate the mitigation efforts. We were able to accelerate the claims process because of our experience and knowledge. And ultimately, the team at GlobalPro obtained a 100% recovery for all of the damages associated with this loss. Both the mobilization of the crane operator who did the rigging to secure the concrete, inclusive of the stucco and concrete damages, the replacement of the lightning protection system, which was damaged by the lightning strikes, on and on. And the insurance company turned around and through quite a bit of negotiation and discussion about the situation, we obtained this recovery on behalf of this association. the association was so happy with our work, it led to a further conversation about our services. Because one of the questions is how is this going to impact premiums? And how is it that our broker believed there was no coverage and now there is coverage? The obviously quick and easy answer is that we have with these programs called Preferred Client Services, and you can engage us to assist you with placement of insurance. Now, we don't sell product, but we can certainly act as your owner's rep in the placement of insurance and advise you, because who better to help you place insurance than those that are going to help you recover from loss or damage? So when asked the question, what is the best time to hire GlobalPro? Today. Call us first. That is the message. That is the clear message. And results speak for themselves. The results speak for themselves. The results here speaks for itself. And certainly, because of our efforts, this association is far better off today than it was yesterday. And when asked the question, is this going to impact my insurance rates or my ability to transact or buy insurance, even their broker, who admittedly had the coverage issue based on the information he was provided at the time, no fault of his own. He was making a kind of the seat of his pants decision on coverage or advising the client based on information he was given at that time, but didn't conduct the independent evaluation inspection that GlobalPro ultimately did in order to determine where there was coverage and actually the true cause of the loss here and what actually led to these loss and damages. So it's no fault of the broker. No fault the broker for the early decision that was made. In fact, because that's ultimately not their role, right? So, the board made certain assumptions about the loss and damage. Not the entirety of the board. There's only a few of the board members. Others wanted to understand more about how this can happen, everything else, and ultimately that is why we got hired, right? Because we had a different perspective on it. When we simply presented the idea that even if it is a latent defect, doesn't mean the totality of the loss and damage would be excluded or not covered. So wrapping this all up, and why I tell you this claim story is to highlight many different things, but certainly the one thing I wanted to make clear is because I've been recently asked this several times as we are in hurricane season, right? The tropics are alive. There's many areas of interest popping up. It almost seemed like there for a couple of weeks, like on a daily basis. There's several right now. There's several. There's one in which is going to impact the Texas community. There's one out in the Atlantic. So the tropics are alive, and a lot of people are asking us right now, when's the best time to contact and to hire GlobalPro? And the answer is, again, today. Call us first. That's what our message always is. That's what our message always has been. This is proof of it. This is a weather event, right? So, and this question is being brought up at a lot of these panels and symposiums that we're having in preparation of hurricane season and changes in the market and insurance. And so it is relevant to this claim as well as what we may see going. We're in the rainy season, so who knows? All these storms are happening. Better to know the information today than to regret it tomorrow. And I'm going to leave you on that note this week here on the Recovery Report Live. I'm Dan Odess. I'm so happy that you could join us. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, like us and follow us on all the social media platforms. And if you want more information, tips on what you should do, what you shouldn't do, check out our website. I don't talk about it enough. I think it's a great resource. GlobalPro.com, real simple. GlobalPro.com. If you check up on the top menu bar, you'll see a section called Resource. Click on resources and pull down. You see all kinds of claim tips. You see the storm center there. There's a bunch of information there. If you don't see something that related to property insurance or business insurance, let us know. Reach out to us. We're available to you 24/7, 365. Our team, whether it's you're on summer vacation, we're always here trying to help our clients, trying to help our community rebound from loss and damage. That's what it's all about. So again, hit the subscribe button, like us and follow us on all social media, and I'll see you right here, same place, same time next week on the Recovery Report Live, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. See you next week, same place, same time. Thank you so much for joining us this week on the Recovery Report Live.